HP 4th Champion PT5. Snape sat in his office on Sunday afternoon, his head hung low supported by the arms that rested on his desk. His mood was dark as he weighed his options and drank his way through a bottle of Ogden's finest. He'd been given a final ultimatum from the only man who could protect him from death, or worse. The worst of it was that Dumbledore was right, he had done it to himself. But he just wanted others to suffer the way he had. But with every child he'd bullied, the only thing that had happened was that he had sunk even deeper into the ever-expanding pit of despair and desperation. He, Severus Snape, had been the one who made all those choices and alienated the few people who had once cared about him or even called themselves friend. He had driven the only good thing in his life away. He had made Lily Evans hate him, and drove her into the arms of James Potter, his worst enemy. Lily had hated James as much as Snape himself had. Even after they had no longer been friends. But Potter had changed. Everyone said it. Everyone saw it. Potter had become a man, and Lily had fallen for the man Potter had become. But he, Severus Snape, had not. He clung to his hate and his jealousy as if they anchored him to her, even after they had driven her away from him. He still clung to it even now, taking it out on Lily's child. A child that could have been his had he only just let it all go and grown up. But when he looked at the boy, all he could see was the arrogance of James Potter, the boy who'd spent nearly every waking moment torturing Snape. Mocking him, showing off for the school. How he had hated that boy. And now that hate was focused on a boy who by all accounts was nothing like Snape's school rival. Snape poured another tall glass of fire whiskey and downed it, coughing as the liquid scorched his throat. He felt his left forearm itch again. He didn't need to look, he knew what he would see. He'd gone straight to Dumbledore the first night he'd felt it irritating him. It had been nothing more than a faint tattoo until this past summer. Dumbledore had nodded sadly and they had talked as they often did about preparing for the Dark Lord's return. Dumbledore had always believed that Snape's former master would rise again one day, and that the war had never truly ended. And now, here was the proof that he had been right. Snape knew, as did Karkaroff, who'd come to see him the night before. Snape had not spoken to any of the other Death Eaters, but he knew they must be feeling it as well. And so, Snape had a choice to make. Live up to Dumbledore's expectations and become a man, or go crawling back to the Dark Lord like a beaten dog, and be another pathetic sycophant to be slaughtered for his master's gain. Snape was rattled out of his musings when there was a small faint knock on his door. Snape waved his wand, opening the door, and nearly choked when he saw the boy standing in the doorway, hand raised to knock once again. Potter was looking at him, and Snape saw that he actually looked nervous. "What do you want, boy? Haven't you done enough to me?" Snape hissed. "I came to apologize, Sir," Harry said. He took at the half-empty bottle and Snape's reddened cheeks, and glassy eyes. Harry wondered exactly what kind of drunk Snape was, and he flexed his arm, making sure his wand was ready. Snape sat up suddenly, and regretted it immediately. His booze-addled mind swam and the room spun. Snape had to grab onto his desk to keep from falling over. "What?" he asked incredulously. "I'm sorry, sir, you were my teacher and I disrespected you. I was angry at you for vanishing my potion and not listening to me, and I spoke out of anger. Things got really out of hand. I'm confused," Snape said, trying to clear his head, and understand. "Is this some twisted prank you and your godfather have cooked up to humiliate me further, because I swear." "Sir, if it were a prank, don't you think it would be done where loads of people could witness it? What good would it be to humiliate you when no one was around? I feel bad about what I said, and for my part in what happened. I spoke out of turn. Don't misunderstand me, I meant every word of it, and I still do, but I was wrong to say it, especially in front of your other students. Harry's voice had gotten stronger as he spoke, his nervousness falling away with every word. He stared at Snape for a moment and then with a slow respectful nod, turned to go. Wait. Snape said. Harry turned and Snape motioned for Harry to sit. Harry did so, keeping his eyes on the potion's master who poured himself another glassful of the amber liquid. I don't know what your godfather, Snape said, putting a heavy sarcastic emphasis on the word godfather, has told you about me. I know that you were once a friend of my mother and that you grew apart over the years and ended up on opposite sides of the war. But then you learned that my parents were in danger. You were the one in danger. Snape corrected. If your mother and father had not opposed the Dark Lord, they might have lived. I begged the Dark Lord to at least spare your mother's life. He said that he would, but I knew it was a lie. I also knew your mother and she would never just stand aside and let someone kill her child. Snape slurred as he brought the glass to his lips and took a long swallow. I went to Dumbledore as soon as I could and begged on my hands and knees for him to protect her, and your father. The Dark Lord knew that Sirius Black was your father's most trusted friend, and ordered us to hunt him down so that we could learn the secret. Then, one night, he called off the search, and he told us that he had learned where your parents were hiding. Snape's eyes looked haunted and Harry swore that he saw tears in the man's eyes. Harry looked as if he was about to speak, but Snape cut him off. He went alone, and I came here to find Dumbledore. I was arrested at the front gates of the school. I was a known Death Eater, and no one but Dumbledore knew I was a spy. So, while I was being put into jail, the Dark Lord killed your mother and father, and then turned his wand on you. Harry stared at Snape. He'd heard this story from Sirius, but his godfather hadn't had many details. Hearing it now from someone who was involved was indescribable. It was heart-wrenching. Somehow, Harry felt for some reason, like he was listening to a final confession. He didn't know what to say, or even if he could speak at all. His throat felt tight and dry, and he felt his hands shaking, though Harry wasn't sure why. In the end, your father proved once and for all that he was in fact the better man. He grew up and stopped bullying me, while I sought any opportunity to hex James Potter. And then, he sacrificed himself to save your mother and you. You loved her, didn't you? Harry asked, his voice small and hoarse. Snape stared at him for a long moment. I just noticed that you put a lot of emphasis when you spoke about my mother. I loved her more than anything and I drove her away because I was jealous and petty and weak. She died because of me. Snape said after a very long silence. They sat quietly for a long time then, just staring at one another. Snape looking pitiful while Harry was trying to process everything. Snape brought his glass to his lips and emptied it, refilling it at once. I'm not sure what you expect me to say, Professor. Harry said finally. Snape looked into the boy's eyes and saw the ghost of his mother reflected in those bright green orbs. I can't give you absolution. I don't have that power. Harry continued. If you truly loved her like I think you did, why would you spend your life being something you knew she hated? Why wouldn't you try and become something greater, something that she would be proud of? Snape looked at Harry almost as if he had been slapped. As he gazed upon into boy, he was taken back many years to a simpler time when he lay on a grassy hill with a petite redhead girl staring at the clouds and talking about magic and what the future promised them. She had looked at him with those soul-searching green eyes and Severus had felt like he could be anything that she had wished him to be. Thank you for your apology, Potter. Snape said tiredly. He gave a weak wave, dismissing Harry from the office. Harry nodded and rose from his seat. He gave Snape one last pitiful glance before leaving the potions master to finish drowning his guilt. With a flick of his wand, the door shut behind the boy and Snape stared at the nearly empty bottle. Somewhere in the depths of his mind he could hear a very disappointed familiar voice chastising him. What have you become, Sev? What had he become? Was it too late? A new war was brewing, one in which he would be in the very center of. How did he wish to be remembered by those left behind? Could he actually be the man Dumbledore knew he could be? The man that Lily had wished him to be? Did he even have the strength and the courage to find out? Harry had slept fitfully and awoke feeling more tired than he did when he'd gone to sleep. Everything Snape had told him was still echoing inside his mind. And Harry was angry that he hadn't thought to ask the question that had plagued him ever since he found out as a small child why his parents were dead. Why had Voldemort come after him in the first place? Dumbledore had promised to tell him everything when the tournament was all over. Snape had spilled his guts and Harry had learned far more of what had happened the night his life was irrevocably changed forever than he'd ever even guessed. Sirius had never even known half of what Snape had confessed to him. But he still had no idea why. The problem was that Harry didn't feel like he could go talk to the Snape again. The man had been very obviously drunk yesterday, and Harry didn't dare bother the man who would most likely be suffering a paralyzing hangover. Okay, sure, he could brew up a hangover potion, but they only did so much. Harry had to push it all to the back of his mind for now. He had more urgent matters that needed his attention. Pansy Parkinson being the most pressing matter at hand. The girl had ruined his first date. He'd embarrassed and hurt Tracy's feelings, and Harry just couldn't let that stand. So, he'd gone to see Sirius and Remus early Sunday morning. If anyone could help him think of an appropriate punishment for the girl that would not even come close to implicating him, it would be the last surviving marauders. They hadn't failed him, and Tracy had been very happy to help him, though she had no idea what she was getting involved in, as Harry wouldn't tell her a thing. He simply asked that she provide him a single strand of Pansy's hair, which she had done an hour later. Harry went to the entrance of the Great Hall before his regular morning run and warded the archway, keying it to Pansy specifically. He unfolded the parchment where Sirius had written the instructions, and Harry followed them to the letter. When he was done, the archway flashed a dull purple. Smiling, Harry made to do his workout and get back so he wouldn't miss the show. When Harry was cleaned, dressed, and prepared for the day, he practically sprinted to the Great Hall, and took a seat along the Hufflepuff table where he would have a clear view of the entrance. When he saw Tracy and Daphne enter, he waved them over to join him. They looked wary of sitting with the Hufflepuffs, but when Cedric, who'd taken a seat next to Harry, scooted up a bit to make room, they sat down. Harry introduced the two girls to the Hufflepuffs that Harry was counting as friends, and breakfast began. However, Tracy's curiosity got the better of her and Harry had barely begun spreading jam on his toast when she had to ask. "Why did you want us to sit here?" Tracy asked very curiously. "Because I'd like it if all my friends could be friends, but also, so you'd have a very good seat for." There came a sudden shriek. Every head in the Great Hall turned to see a girl with a very engorged posterior holding handfuls of black hair, which had clearly fallen out of her now shiny bald head. Tracy's eyes were in danger of popping right out of her head, while Daphne coughed and sputtered and held her nose, where pumpkin juice had just came shooting out in a stream onto her plate of eggs. Susan and Hannah, who were sitting across from Harry, were holding onto each other to keep from falling off their bench, tears in their eyes, faces red from serious lack of air as they laughed. Megan Jones was holding onto Ernie Macmillan, who was pounding the table so hard the goblets were shaking. Cedric was turning purple, while Cho Chang, who had decided to join her boyfriend that morning, was wiping her eyes. Sally Ann had hid her head in Justin's chest, clinging to his robes to keep from falling while Justin was howling uproariously. Pansy Parkinson couldn't even begin to believe what was happening to her. As she entered the great hall with a few of her cronies in tow, she felt her skirt being lifted in the backside and her balance became thrown off. As she tried to take a step, a loud thunderous bang that sounded like someone had slammed on the head of a drum, sounded. Then, her vision was blurred as her hair fell in her face. And kept falling. Reaching up, she gripped two fistfuls of her shiny black locks and pulled away, her eyes bulging at the sight of her hands full of her own hair. There was nothing left but to scream in horror. And then it got worse. Her scream had alarmed the rest of the students who all turned and laughed at the sight of the bald girl with the ginormous butt. Pansy turned, nearly toppling over, and ran away, the sound of giant drums being hit ringing out with every step. "Did you do that for me?" Tracy asked when she was finally able to calm down. "Do what?" Harry asked innocently, wiping at his eyes. Tracy wasn't fooled, nor was anyone else sitting near them, but they all got the unspoken message. Tracy grabbed Harry by the neck and hugged him tightly. "Thank you," she whispered in his ear. "Don't thank me until she apologizes." Harry chuckled, then he smiled widely when she pulled away a bit, and then kissed him, full on the lips. There was a chorus of catcalls, but Harry didn't feel himself get red. Instead he just stared into Tracy's grateful eyes for a moment or two before she let him go and they begun enjoying their breakfast. "So you and Tracy Davis looked pretty cozy this morning," Hermione said as she handed Harry a pot to put his plant trimmings in. "I suppose." Harry shrugged. "Are you two a couple?" Hermione asked, watching Harry very carefully. "I don't know. We've had one date that got ruined. I don't know if that makes us a couple. She's nice, and I like her, but I don't know. I guess I'm just letting things happen in their own course, you know." Hermione nodded as she reached out to hold the squirming plant so Harry could continue pruning it. "You really did a number on Lavender the other day," Hermione said. Harry looked down the workbench and spied the girl in question looking at him with undisguised desire. Lavender was very pretty. Arguably the prettiest girl in the entire fourth year. She had bright blonde hair that was kind of curly, which was currently being held out of her face with a blue headband. She had blue-gray eyes, and a fairly athletic body. Harry was really beginning to hate the Hogwarts uniforms. You really couldn't get a decent look of the girls' bodies with those long robes covering them. Harry gave a soft smile to Lavender and she winked. "I had no idea what I was talking about," Harry admitted lowly to Hermione, who burst into chuckles. "If that's the case, you fooled all of us. Lavender kept us up half the night speculating on exactly what you've done with girls. She's extremely curious about you now. To be honest, I think she intimidates me a bit. It was fun though. At first I was just playing around, but then it was like I had to see who broke first, you know. A battle of wills, which you clearly won." Hermione nodded her understanding. "She's going to try again. It's a matter of pride that she can make boys blush and cower. I think she likes making boys, I think uncomfortable would work here. You know. She likes embarrassing them." Harry gave a questioning look. "Yes, but it's more than that." Hermione's face began reddening. "She likes to make it difficult to walk." Harry stared blankly at her, an odd expression on his face, and Hermione got even redder as she tried to think of how to explain it to him without just coming right out and saying it. "Makes it harder for them to move." Harry stared at her for another couple of seconds, and then realization hit him like a ton of bricks. Finally. I thought I was going to have to spell it out for you. Hermione sighed. Why didn't you just say she likes to give boys boners? Harry. Hermione shrieked and slapped his arm hard. Other students looked up, and Harry just laughed at Hermione's discomfort. There's really no need to be so crass. No, but it's fun. Harry smiled, then he grew serious. Tell me something. Do girls really like to be grabbed and all that? I mean, you know, pushed against walls and have their hair pulled and all that. You know, for as much of a flirt as you are, I'm discovering that you know very little about girls. And I'd appreciate it if you kept it that way. Harry said pointedly, raising an eyebrow. Would you make my rear end blow up or my hair fall out? Hermione asked, a teasing lilt in her voice. Harry turned and gave her a very pointed look. No. He said flatly. I'd do something much worse. Hermione blanched a bit, until Harry began to smile again. She really liked talking with Harry. He treated her as an equal. He made fun of her, but not to be mean like just about everyone else in the castle. He made her laugh, and she found that the more she was around him, the less uptight she felt. I'd be careful. I do know the Weasley twins, and if I asked, they'd make your life a living hell for the rest of the year. Hermione intoned. The truth was that Fred and George were civil to her, but she had no idea if they'd come to her defense. But Harry didn't need to know that. Yeah, I've heard they're quite the pranksters, but have either of them done anything close to what happened this morning? Harry asked. They made Ron's robes turn pink, and he couldn't get them off all day. Neville said from across the bench. And he's their brother. Pink? Harry asked, again looking up the bench where the redhead boy was ogling Lavender's chest. It had these horrible lacy cuffs and it smelled really pretty, like women's perfume. Neville went on. I thought his head was going to explode with how violet his face got. Neville began to laugh quietly. Parvati said the color of his face ended up going together quite nicely with his robes. They can be quite creative. Hermione remarked, smiling along with Neville, and Harry nodded. I need to meet these guys. Harry smiled evilly. They could help me with an ongoing project I have in mind. Oh, gods, what have I done? Hermione thought as she shivered looking at Harry's smile. Neville, how early do you usually get up in the morning? Harry asked, changing subjects. Neville looked up, his face coloring slightly. I don't know, why? Well, I'm getting tired of doing my workouts alone, and I thought maybe you'd like to come running with me. You don't have to, of course, but you might find that you like it. Yeah. Neville said quickly, nodding. Sure. Cool. Meet me in the entrance hall about 6:15. We'll take it slow until you build up your stamina. Harry smiled. Why didn't you ask me? Hermione asked, looking put out. First off, you look as though you're already in pretty good shape. Hermione felt her face burn crimson at the... Was it a compliment, or just an observation? And secondly, no offense Hermione, but I spend so much time around girls now, that I'd like to have a period in the day where I get to hang around guys. You know, so we can talk about guy things. Harry smiled and Hermione gave him a wry smile. You mean girls? She asked, and Harry smiled and nodded emphatically. See, I knew you'd understand. Harry grinned. Hermione simply shook her head and rolled her eyes while Harry laughed and Neville grinned. Potter. Harry, Hermione, and Neville all turned to see who had bellowed. Draco Malfoy came marching up to them with two massive mountains of muscle on either side of him, each looking rather stupidly at the three. Harry remembered seeing them with Malfoy before but couldn't remember if they'd been introduced. "Thought you were being funny this morning, did you?" Malfoy snarled as he came up to Harry, glaring hard. "Thought you'd make one of your betters look the fool." "Okay," Harry said, holding up his hands and shaking his head. "You're going to have to explain this to me because I simply have no idea what you're talking about, and I need to get to Charms, so hurry this up." "You played that prank on Pansy. I heard Davis tell Greengrass that she gave you one of Pansy's hairs." "So?" Harry shrugged. "That doesn't prove anything. Maybe I am so in love with Pansy that I made a batch of polyjuice potion and became her for an hour just to be close to her." Neville burst out laughing while Hermione looked simultaneously disgusted and amused. Draco looked at them clearly confused, but one of the hulking gorillas got the joke, because he snickered, causing Draco to snap his head towards him with his eyes hard. "I'm not amused, Potter. You've insulted Pansy, and you've insulted Slytherin House." "Will you get to the point?" Harry said, tiring of Draco's diatribe. "I demand you apologize." Draco snapped. "And if I say no?" Harry asked, cocking an eyebrow and taking a step forward. The two gorillas cracked their knuckles in what they must have thought was a menacing manner. Harry simply ignored them, holding Draco's eyes for a long moment. "What will happen if I refuse to bend to your will, you puffed-up peacock?" Draco's lip curled and he took a step forward, his eyes narrowing. "If you refuse, I will make you wish you had." Harry stared at Draco for a moment, and then guffawed. Draco actually jumped at Harry's outburst. He looked to his two flunkies, who were just as confused, if not a bit more. "Come see me when you can actually back up your threat." Harry chuckled, turning back to his friends and leading them on. "Don't you turn your back on me, Potter." Draco snapped, his wand in his hand and the curse on his lips. Harry was faster. Dropping his backpack, and spinning Harry's wand flashed and Draco found himself on his behind with large angry-looking boils sprouting up on his face. One of his bodyguards, for lack of a better word, went to help Draco, getting a mouthful of pus as one of the boils exploded. The other gorilla set his sights on Harry and had his wand in his hand. "I'm giving you fair warning here, pal." Harry smirked as students backed away, afraid they might get hit by a stray spell. "If the worst you can do is a stinging hex, I'd leave it alone and see to your friend." The bruiser snarled angrily and flicked his wand. Harry was very happy that Cedric had taught him the shield charm, as there wasn't much room to maneuver. His shield absorbed the weak blue spell that his opponent had flung his way. "What the hell was that?" Harry asked with a surprised grin. "Get him, Crab." Draco snapped as his other friend helped him to his feet. "Enough." It was Professor Moody who was stomping down the hall. "What the hell is going on here?" Sir Hermione said, her voice soft and unsure. "Malfoy tried to attack Harry." Harry was just defending himself. "Is that true, boy?" Moody asked Draco, who shook his head, boils oozing. "He started it." Draco snapped, pointing at Harry, who was now sliding his wand into his wrist holster. "He was going to hex me in my back," Harry said flatly. "Is that so?" Moody asked, eyeing both Harry and Draco. Harry had to suppress a shiver as the electric blue eye focused on him. "Thought you'd best someone when they couldn't defend themselves." "Well, perhaps I'll see if you can get the better of me tonight in detention, at 8 o'clock, boy. Don't make me come looking for you. Now, off to class all of you." Harry threw Malfoy one final smirk before picking up his bag and leading Hermione and Neville to their next class. "How did you know Malfoy was going to hex you?" Neville asked. "I didn't," Harry said nonchalantly. but I figured he was going to. If he hadn't, I would have had detention, I suppose. So, I guess it was lucky that he did try. The thing is, we had this game back at Salem. I don't know how else to explain it, but we would always try and hex each other. The teachers didn't seem to mind, so long as it wasn't too bad. You know, stinging hexes or things like that. But if it hurt someone, well. I heard one boy got expelled for getting a little too aggressive. Anyway, you get really good at anticipating, and your reflexes get fast. That jinx I used just now would have landed me in detention, but it would have been worth it. Somehow I get the feeling that whatever he was going to use wouldn't have been as kind. You've gone and made a real bad enemy, Neville said. He's going to make it his personal mission to make life difficult for you. Hermione agreed as the three took seats at the front of the class. He thrives on other people's misery, you know. I think I have bigger things to worry about, don't you? Harry gave the two a pointed look just as Professor Flitwick climbed to the top of a large pile of books so he could be seen by his class. Hermione could only sigh. Harry put up a really tough facade, but as they drew closer to the first task, she could see faint glints of worry in his eyes. She wondered if any of his other acquaintances noticed, and if they did they mention it at all? Harry just seemed so sure of himself all the time. Hermione couldn't even imagine a Harry Potter who was insecure or scared. Yet, even as he sat next to her attentively listening to Professor Flitwick talk about summoning charms, Hermione wondered just how well Harry was really dealing with the mounting pressure. Sirius and Remus were sitting at the table in the kitchen of Sirius' house discussing all they currently knew regarding current events. Both of them were at a great loss for what should be their next move because of their serious lack of information. With barely 2 weeks before the first task, time was running out and they still had no idea on how to help Harry or what he might be facing. Remus seemed sure that it had been their former friend Peter Pettigrew who had placed Harry's name into the Goblet of Fire, but Sirius wasn't so sure. Certain details didn't add up in his mind. Peter wasn't the type to do something like this, much less even think of it on his own. Sirius felt that Peter was working with someone else. Someone he felt could protect him. As they debated some of the definitive facts, a great barn owl landed on the sill of the window and began tapping on the glass with its beak. Sirius turned a questioning look at Remus, who could only shrug. Remus got up and opened the window to allow the owl entrance. It swooped to the table in front of Sirius and presented its leg where a small roll of parchment was tied. Sirius took the parchment and the owl immediately took flight out the window. With a puzzled expression on his face, Sirius unrolled the scroll as Remus closed the window and took his seat across from Sirius again. Odd. Sirius said, looking to Remus, who gave him a questioning look. What? It's from Dumbledore. It says that he thinks we should go have a drink or two at the Hog's Head tonight. Says it could be enlightening. So, by going to the Hog's Head, we'll find enlightenment? I don't get it. Remus shook his head. I'm going to guess that by spending some time in the tavern tonight, we might learn something important. But he doesn't say what time, or who we should be looking for. Sirius commented. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that it might become very obvious. Sirius nodded and stood up with Remus following suit. I'll get my cloak, shall I? Sirius shrugged, and in a few moments, they were off. November had turned bitingly cold in the last few days, and Sirius was sure that snow was coming in the next few days. Just the thought of snow made Sirius crave the warm beaches of Florida. He'd taken Harry there for Christmas ever since the boy had discovered girls. Harry was much like James had been. Incredibly charming and suave, though he didn't realize it, which just made him all the more charming to the females. Sirius never pointed it out for fear that Harry would become cocky, like he himself had been. Sirius' deepest hope was that Harry would find one girl that captured the boy's heart and become as devoted to her as James had been to Lily. But before that could happen, Harry needed to make it through this year. The Hog's Head was on the other side of the village. Sirius glanced into the shops as they passed, already trying to think of what to get his godson for Christmas. Sirius sometimes wondered if he'd spoiled Harry over the years. Harry had never wanted for anything, but he seemed not to care too much for things. He was usually at his happiest when they were just spending time together. He'd been that way most of his life, in fact. Sirius' job had been to give him a normal childhood, but now, as he walked with Remus to the pub, Sirius realized that Harry's childhood had never been close to normal. They had been on the move until Harry was 11. That's when they'd settled in America, and Harry began school. Sirius doubted that there was another kid in the world who could claim to have done even half of what Harry had done by the time he'd turned 11. Between the magical and the muggle worlds, Harry had experienced so much. Every great adventure Sirius could think of, they had done together. Sirius sometimes lay awake at night thinking that he knew that Harry would not see adulthood, and that was why he took Harry to do everything, so that Harry could not possibly have a single regret. Sirius shook those terrible thoughts from his mind as they reached the front door of the tavern. There were only a handful of patrons tonight. Two men who glanced at the newcomers before bending back to their whispered conversation. A hunched-back old crone with a long nose reading the Daily Prophet and drinking a rather slimy-looking green drink, and three rough-looking warlocks. Sirius and Remus settled in a table in the furthest corner with a clear view of the door. The barman came bustling over and glowered at them for a few moments. 2 ales. Sirius ordered, slipping off his cloak as Remus did the same. The barman nodded gruffly and shambled off, returning a few minutes later with 2 pewter pint mugs. Sirius gave the man a galleon and asked that he open a tab for them. "So now what?" Sirius asked after he took a long sip from his mug. "We wait, I guess." Remus shrugged. They sat in silence, drinking and staring at the door for only 10 minutes before the answer to all of tonight's questions opened the door and lumbered inside, calling out an order. Sirius turned a wide smile on his friend, who was chuckling now. "Is that Hagrid?" Sirius shouted. The great mountain of a man turned to S.E. who'd said his name and broke out into a great beaming smile. "Sirius Black, and Remus Lupin," Hagrid bellowed, holding out his arms. "By all th's good. How are ye?" Sirius and Remus rose and shook the dustbin-sized hands of the Hogwarts gamekeeper. "Won't you join us, Hagrid?" Sirius asked, motioning to their table. "You should address him as Professor now, Sirius." Remus grinned. "He teaches care of magical creatures now." Hagrid beamed and puffed out his chest as Sirius exclaimed great surprise. "Well, I can think of no one more qualified." Sirius praised the man. "Then I insist you join us, and your first round is on me." "Right kind, oh yeah," Hagrid said, taking a seat, which Remus reinforced with a quick flash of his wand. "I met Yuri godson the other day. Looks exactly like his father, yeah no. Been meaning to have him down to me hut for a cuppa." "He mentioned that he met you." Sirius nodded. "Said you looked exactly as he'd pictured you all these years." "Ah, go on." Hagrid waved one of his massive hands in an embarrassed sort of way. The barman returned setting a large bucket-sized tankard before Hagrid. "Thank ya, Abe," Hagrid said, taking 2 very large swallows before setting the tankard down heavily. "Real exciting year, isn't it?" Sirius asked, probing the man a bit. "Tri-Wizard Tournament. Hasn't been held in over 100 years." "Oh, it has been." Especially when you consider that it brought little Harry Potter back from the dead, so to speak. He's a right popular lad too. Got nearly all the girls eyeing him everywhere he goes. A lot of the older girls watching him close like as well. I even got a lot of my third-year kids asking after him. Course I don't know the whole story, but they ask me just the same. Not much to tell, really. Sirius said. Dumbledore asked that I hide him and keep him safe. Thought it had to be summit like tha. Hagrid grinned, taking another huge mouthful of his ale. Have you been involved in a lot of the tournament preparations? Remus asked. Hagrid shook his great shaggy head. Nah. The ministry's got people taking care of all tha stuff. Keeping it all very quiet. Don't wanna give away anything, do they? Sirius saw the little of Hagrid's face turn a bit scarlet and his eyes crinkled in amusement. You sneaky blighter. Sirius smirked. You saw something, didn't you? There you are, Hagrid. The three men turned to see Ludo Bagman enter the bar, a huge award-winning smile on his weathered face. Ludo. Hagrid smiled, waving the newcomer to join them. Glad ya made it? Though it turns out I wouldn't have been alone after all. Ludo Bagman, this is Remus Lupin and Sirius Black, Harry Potter's godfather. My word. Ludo smiled, offering his hand. It is indeed an honor. The honor is ours. Sirius smiled. Won't you pull up a chair? I was a huge fan of yours when you were with the Wasps. Well, thank you, my good man. Ludo said as he drew up a chair and sat down. Remus motioned for the barman to bring another round for all of them. Ludo's in charge of the tournament, Hagrid said as he drained his tankard. Well, not completely, you know. I'll be commentating on all the tasks, you know, and I've done a lot to get the tournament going. After I retired from the Wasps, I got a great job in the department for magical games and sports, you know. So I expect it took a great deal of time to figure out what tasks the champions would be facing. Remus asked, and Ludo rolled his eyes, giving a great dramatic sigh. Oh my word, this has been in the works for 2 years. We've been in negotiations with both Bosbatten and Durmstrang for nearly that long. Madame Maxime was very willing to hear us out, but Karkaroff, you know. Ludo shrugged. It was Dumbledore himself who got the man to change his mind. He seemed very uninterested in coming at all. Karkaroff? Sirius asked, looking confused. Igor Karkaroff? Yes. Ludo said, taking a drink of his ale. Sirius looked to Remus, who gave a slight nod. Sirius knew they'd be talking about this little fact later. All three heads of school were quite worried about the safety of those competing, and so, the first new rule we agreed on was the age of the students who could enter. No one under 17. Well, we all know how that turned out. Ludo smiled sympathetically. What a surprise though. Harry Potter alive after all these years. Hagrid said, lifting his newly refilled tankard in salute. What kinds of things were you looking at for the tournament tasks, Ludo? Remus asked curiously. I imagine it was very difficult in coming up with challenges that would truly test the champions. It was at that. Ludo said. It was the third task that gave us the most difficulty. In the end though, I think everyone was pleased with what we came up with. Just you wait, my friends. Oh, the things you'll see. Sirius gave a meaningful look at Remus. It was clear this is what Dumbledore had sent them here for. Unfortunately, these two were being extremely tight-lipped at the moment. This was going to take great patience, and a lot of ale. So, they settled in, and turned the conversation to petty things. They endured nearly 2 hours of Bagman's stories of his Quidditch career. Those stories changed when they started doing fire whiskey shots with every round. Ludo began to talk about his gambling troubles. He dug himself quite a hole with the goblins at the Quidditch World Cup. He even had a couple of Hogwarts kids hounding him for welching on the bet he'd made with them. Ludo was hoping to make everything right again with the Triwizard Tournament. I just know that things will turn around with the first task. Ludo slurred, pointing a shaky finger at Remus. I just know that Crumb is going to be the fastest with his D.R.E.R. task. Don't know bout THA. Hagrid bellowed drunkenly. They all got an equal chance, don't they? Though I reckon whoever ends up facing THA Horntail's going to have a real job of it. Gave Madame Maxime quite a turn when I took her to see M up close and all. Sirius turned his head to Remus, who did the same to Sirius. Both of them nearly falling out of their seats with the movement. They were both quite drunk, but Hagrid's slip had a sobering effect. Did you say a horntail? Remus asked, his speech thick and his eyes glassy. And the French headmistress saw it as well. Well, I took her to see them. Hagrid beamed. Thought she might find them interesting. You should have seen her smile at me when she first got sight of them. She's a lovely woman. Oh yes. Ludo said, clapping his hands. I know what you mean, Hagrid. A nasty beast I've never seen. They have to keep it stunned all the time. Every time it wakes up, it seems to get nastier and nastier. On the other hand, that Welsh Green is so docile, that Champion might be able to just walk right up and pet it on the snout, I dare say. Perhaps I should make that a bet, eh? It was clear that Bagman hadn't heard Hagrid say he'd brought Madame Maxime to see the dragons. Both Ludo and Hagrid burst into laughter at Ludo's idea to place bets on the tournament. Then Ludo fell back off his seat and passed out on the floor, making Hagrid laugh even harder. I think it's time you all be heading home now. The barman bellowed. I'll take him with me, yeah. Hagrid said, pointing to Ludo, who was little more than a lump on the floor. He's staying up at the castle anyhow. He can kip on me sofa. Hagrid lumbered to his feet and gathered the unconscious Bagman in his great arms. I spect I'll see ya lot at the tasks then. And with that, Hagrid lumbered out into the cold night, followed closely by two very drunk and staggering men. Dragons, Sirius said in a hoarse whisper as he leaned against Remus. Are they mad? I'm sure there will be some sort of protections, but I think you're right. Bringing dragons and making teenagers face them with no help. It's ludicrous. At least we can finally give Harry something to aim for, Sirius said groggily. First thing in the morning, we'll go to see him, Remus said, stumbling over his own feet. I just hope we can remember it all. Maybe we can visit old Pomfret and she can fix us up with one of her special potions. Sirius said, giving a pointed though very drunken look to his old friend before they both started laughing like madmen. Harry awoke at his usual time and stumbled out of bed. His muscles felt a bit stiff. Harry wasn't surprised, really. Cedric had really put him through his paces last night. The older Hufflepuff felt that Harry needed to get faster with his casting, and had dueled Harry in an unused classroom. Harry still smiled when he thought about how impressed Cedric was with how fast Harry was able to dodge his spell work. When Cedric asked, Harry invited him to wake up bright and early and join him and Neville for a run. Then Cedric proceeded to punish Harry with his vast repertoire of spell knowledge. Harry finished dressing and made his way to the entrance hall where he was to meet Neville and Cedric. It was bitingly cold, and Harry knew winter was very close now. He wondered how bad Scottish winters were compared to the Salem ones. Good morning, Harry. Neville said as he stood up from the step he was sitting on. Neville had made sure to ask Harry what one wore for this type of thing, as he was sure that his Hogwarts robes would not do. So, Neville gave a questioning look to Harry as his new friend looked over his chosen attire. Those jeans will work for now, but I'd get some sweatpants for the future. Trust me, you'll appreciate the roominess. Good tennis shoes, though. Oh, good, I'm not late, Cedric said as he came hurtling out of a nearby hallway. He was wearing his Quidditch practice outfit. Right then, so what happens now? He asked with a smile. Neville looked a bit nervous, but happy to be in such popular company all the same. Right, well, we're going to go to the Quidditch pitch and do a few laps. Since you're both pretty new to this, we'll go slow for now, Harry said, and off they went. All three boys shivered immediately once they were outside. Don't worry, Harry said encouragingly. Once we get moving, you'll be thankful that it's so cold. Harry began explaining why he'd begun running and everything else as they walked when something caught his eye. Two familiar-looking men running up from the front gates towards the castle. He stopped to watch their approach, Cedric and Neville standing at his side. Do you know them? Cedric asked as they got closer, and then he realized that Harry did, and he did as well. Is that Professor Lupin? Neville asked, taking a step forward. Harry. Sirius said, clearly out of breath. Sirius? What happened to you? Sirius and Lupin looked as though they'd just come from a very nasty fight. They were both covered in mud and muck, and as Sirius reached him, a very nasty smell reached Harry's nose. Oh gods! Harry said, taking an involuntary step backward. You smell like you slept in a garbage dumpster. It was a pig pen, actually, Sirius remarked with a haggard smile. Harry looked between his godfather and Remus, who gave an affirmative nod at Sirius' claim. It's a long story, Harry, Remus began, clutching a stitch at his side and gasping for air. Suffice to say, dragons, Sirius panted. That's what you'll be facing. Dragons. Harry stumbled back a bit and fell on his rear end, staring up with shock. Are you joking? Are you certain? Cedric asked, his eyes wide with surprise. We met Hagrid and Ludo Bagman at the pub last night. Dumbledore sent us there. Remus began. Hagrid, bless him, has never been very good at keeping secrets. Get enough ale into him, which can be very, very dangerous if you try and match him shot for shot. Sirius chuckled a bit. After quite a bit of drink, he and Ludo let slip that they've got dragons for you lot to face in the first task. He also mentioned that he showed the French headmistress, so you can bet the French champion knows. And we just learned that the Durmstrang headmaster is Igor Karkaroff. Remus added, allowing himself to kneel down to rest. He and Sirius had sprinted all the way to the castle the moment they had awoken. Why is that important? Neville asked, his voice small and nervous sounding. He felt like he was a part of a conversation that he really shouldn't have heard. Karkaroff was a Death Eater, Sirius said. Got out of a long sentence in Azkaban by offering his fellows in his stead. Then he left the country, fearing for his life. How he managed to become headmaster of a school is beyond me. But you can bet he'll use every dirty trick in the book to see that his champion wins. So at least now you're on equal footing with them, said. Cedric nodded and thanked the two men. Least we can do for you since you've been helping Harry here. Sirius nodded. Do you know exactly what we'll have to do? Cedric asked, but both Remus and Sirius shook their heads. What you both keep in mind is that dragons are very tough. Their hides are impervious to most spells, and it takes quite a few wizards just to stun one. But their eyes are vulnerable. Sirius offered. Keep that in mind. A good conjunctivitis curse to a dragon's eyes will all but blind it. Suppose we know what to work on then, don't we? Harry said, looking up at Cedric, who nodded. I suppose we do, but we can't assume that it's about fighting a dragon. I bet there's more to it. Very wise. Remus nodded. If we find out any more, we'll let you know. In the meantime, I think it's best if you all act ignorant. It wouldn't do if this got out. All three boys nodded, and Remus and Sirius rose shakily to their feet. Sirius went to hug Harry, who also had gotten to his feet, but Harry held up a hand and then waved at the air, wrinkling his nose. Sirius got the message and gave sheepish smile. I'll see you this weekend, and I want to hear that you're training hard. Sirius said, and Harry promised. With that, Harry's godfather and his adopted uncle turned and left the grounds. Dragons, Neville said in a hushed, reverent whisper. I can't believe it. Blimey, you guys, what are you going to do? Not much we can do until we know exactly what is expected of us, Cedric said. But we will definitely be practicing that conjunctivitis curse. And I'll be working hard with you, Harry. If this running thing is what made you so fast, I'm going to be doing my best to catch up to you. Harry felt a little bad when they all separated in the entrance hall. He'd pushed Neville and Cedric a bit harder than he'd originally intended, but he had kept imagining a giant scaly, fire-breathing monster intent on eating him. At least now he knew what was coming. That did alleviate some of his worry. He returned to his room, showered and readied himself for classes, and then went off to breakfast, where he ran into Hannah Abbott. Hi, Harry. She smiled. Hey, Hannah. Where's Susan? She's not feeling well. She went up to see Madame Pomfret. Hopefully she'll be down soon. Would you like to have breakfast with me? Yeah, sure. They went to the Great Hall together, but they didn't sit in their usual spot. It seemed obvious that Hannah wanted to have him all to herself for a bit. Harry felt himself grow a bit nervous as they sat down, and had to remind himself that Hannah was a really nice person, and there was no need to be nervous. So, you've met a ton of people since you've been here, and already you seem to have someone special. You don't waste time, do you? She asked, a coy smile on her face. Tracy and I are friends. We had one date. Harry said, looking curious. Why is everyone so interested in my love life? Because there are a lot of girls in this school who'd like to be your girlfriend. Are you one of them? Harry asked, looking at Hannah sharply. The blonde shrugged, but her face became a bit pink. I haven't really decided yet, she said simply. Don't get me wrong, I think you're nice and all, but I haven't really had a chance to spend time with you alone and really get to know you. I was hoping maybe we could. I don't know. Have some type of date. Harry said with a smile. I don't know that I'd say date. Hannah shook her head. But maybe we could take a walk this afternoon after classes. She looked hopefully at Harry, who thought about it for a few minutes. I don't think that would be a problem. I only have one class after lunch. So do I. So why don't we meet in the entrance hall right after class and we can spend a bit of time together? Hannah smiled and Harry nodded. Sounds fun. So, how are you doing potions now? She asked, changing subject. Oh. I get my lessons for the week on Monday, and Dumbledore's going to watch me brew in a room in the dungeons. It'll be kind of like self-study or something. I still have to write essays and stuff, but they'll be sent to my potions professor at Salem. Frankly, I'm relieved. Do you know you guys are a year behind me? Really? Yeah, I did antidotes last year, Harry said, and Hannah frowned. I wonder why that is. I don't know why, but I thought schools would be pretty close to the same all over. Well, it could be that I typically go year-round, and Hogwarts has a long summer break, Harry suggested. Hannah shrugged, and they continued eating and talking about non-important things. Hannah was interested in seeing Harry fly against some of her Hufflepuff housemates. Apparently that was the most popular topic of discussion in the common room, besides what girl Harry fancied. As they were finishing their meal, two people approached them. Hey Harry, want to walk to Transfiguration with us? Neville asked. He looked a lot better than he had when they'd finished their run. Yeah, sure. Neville, Hermione, this is Hannah. Harry smiled as he introduced the three. Hi, Hermione said in a soft voice. Neville's face burned crimson as he mumbled a hello. Hannah smiled back, and Harry got up from his seat, and said goodbye to Hannah. She gave another brilliant smile, and Harry followed his two Gryffindor friends to class. She seems nice, Hermione said once they'd left the Great Hall. One of the first people I met. Most of the Hufflepuffs are. Harry shrugged. But Hannah's really nice, Neville said in a dreamy sort of way. Both Harry and Hermione stopped walking, and Neville turned to look at them oddly. What? Do you like Hannah? Harry asked, a smirk on his face. Neville turned so red that Harry felt he could feel the heat radiating from his face. You dog, Neville. He laughed. You never told me that you liked her, Hermione said, and Neville shook his head. I don't feel comfortable talking to you about everything, Hermione. You don't tell me everything, do you? No, I guess not. Why don't you ask her out? Neville sputtered and choked until Harry slapped him on the back. I'm a bit curious about that myself, Harry said once Neville had stopped choking. I can't, Neville said, looking very frightened. She'd laugh at me, and I don't think I could stand it. Neville, the worst thing she could do is laugh at you, and if she did, that's not a girl you want to be with anyway. You're a good guy. If she can't see that, then you're better off without her. I'll tell you what, I'm supposed to take a walk with her later today. I'll find out what she thinks of you, all right. You'd do that? Sure, Harry said, patting Neville's shoulder. It's what friends do. Just remember, if she doesn't like you that way, it's not the end of the world. There are a ton of girls here, and I'm positive that there's at least 3 who think you're worthy of them. 3 girls for Longbottom. Came a drawling, superior-sounding laugh from behind. Are you going to confine them yourself, Potter, or are these first years who don't know any better? Harry and his 2 friends turned, and Harry stared at Malfoy hard. Is that how you get a date, Draco? Bewitching poor defenseless first years? It's really sick. Not to mention pathetic, Neville said quickly, sounding much bolder than Harry had ever heard the boy sound. Harry gave an impressed smile to Neville, who looked ready to run. Unlike Longbottom, I have a natural charm that just draws girls to me. Draco smirked. Then why is it I've only seen you with these 2? Harry asked, motioning to Crabbe and Goyle. Unless they're just really ugly girls, in which case, I've got to tell you, your charms are broken. Or were you talking about Pansy Baldy Balloon Butt? Hey, has her ass deflated yet? Hermione and Neville both coughed, trying to prevent themselves from laughing. Draco stared at the both of them in turn with cold, narrowed eyes, while his 2 gorilla-like bodyguards cracked their knuckles. Harry simply rolled his eyes at this and turned back to Draco, who started poking him in the chest. You think you're so great because you're a champion and everyone knows who you are. Well, not everyone is going to bow before you and worship the ground you walk on, Potter. I for one know just how insignificant you really are. Nothing more than an insect waiting to be squashed. Draco turned to glare at Neville, who took a step backward, though he tried to look tough. As for you, Longbottom, you should do the world a favor and kill yourself. You fat squib. Is that the very best you've got? Harry chuckled. Hermione turned her worried eyes on him as he began to laugh, while Neville gave a confused look to her. Really? I'm an insect. Harry continued to laugh, grabbing Neville's shoulder dramatically as if trying to appear frightened despite his laughter. Oh, please, someone save me, I'm an insect. AHH. Harry turned and threw his arms in the air, running into the Transfiguration classroom like a terrified child, making many who had now gathered to watch the display burst into raucous laughter. Hermione and Neville both turned to one another and broke out laughing, and with backward glances to the now infuriated Malfoy turned to join Harry in the classroom. Harry was sitting at his desk, next to where Neville and Hermione were now sitting, still laughing heartily. Wow! Harry said when his friends joined him. Has he always been a supreme jerk? Ever since our first year. Hermione said, taking out her book. I'd love it if someone really put him in his place. Didn't I do that? Like, yesterday in fact? Harry asked. All you did was make him angry. One thing I know about Malfoy is that he hates being embarrassed. He's going to do something to you soon, and it won't be nice. Neville said, though he was still smiling. Bring it on. Harry said as McGonagall entered the class and called it to order. Potions turned out to be rather relaxing for Harry. He was by himself in a small class while Dumbledore observed him. The Hogwarts headmaster handed him his assignment from his potions teacher at Salem, and by the end of the class period, Harry had put together a rather nice calming draft. Harry joined up with Hermione and Neville as they were walking into the Great Hall for lunch. How was your potions lesson? Hermione asked at once as she and Neville took seat, with Harry joining them. Wasn't too terrible. Bit lonely actually. Dumbledore just sat there watching me, but he wouldn't talk. I guess he wanted me to concentrate or something. Wish I had lessons without Snape. Neville grumbled, ladling soup into his bowl. He loves to pick on me for some reason. I'm like his personal punching bag. You could always piss him off enough so that he attacks you. Harry shrugged. It worked for me. Neville smiled and shook his head, suggesting he wasn't nearly brave enough to even attempt it and that Snape was likely to hex him or worse. Why did I ever let you talk me into taking arithmancy? Ginny Weasley snapped at Hermione as she took a seat next to her bushy-haired best friend. I have to read 3 chapters and write an essay on the formulaic equations that are used in basic spell work. It's mental. As I recall, you said you didn't want to skate along and do everything easy. Hermione replied, looking at the redhead with a strange grin of satisfaction. I should have just done runes and called it good. Ginny sighed, reaching for a bowl of crisps. Do you take arithmancy, Harry? No. Harry said. I thought it looked too challenging, and I get distracted easily. No you don't. Hermione argued. I watched you in Transfiguration. You've been watching me. Harry smirked, making Hermione go scarlet. Just how closely do you watch me? You told me you barely look at him. Ginny added, obviously reveling in her friend's clear discomfort. That's not what I meant and you know it. Hermione snapped at Harry. And don't you say anything, Neville. Hermione pointed a slender finger at the boy who was leaning forward to add his comments. Neville simply smiled, trying to keep from laughing. Harry was kept from retorting as two girls approached. Harry recognized them both as being from Ravenclaw, but he couldn't think of their names. He had spoken with them, but he hadn't had any interaction since that nearly disastrous breakfast the week before. "Hey Hermione," the Asian girl said. "Are we still on for studying after dinner?" "Of course, Sue." Hermione smiled brightly. "I'll bring my notes and we can compare them. I think we can get that charms essay done in no time." "Brilliant," said the Indian girl. "We'll see you tonight then. Bye, Harry." "Bye." Harry smiled, and when they were gone he looked at Hermione. "Made some new friends, have we?" "Yes, and it's really because of you. Mandy and I got to know each other, and she's been talking about me to the other Ravenclaws. They caught me in arithmancy yesterday and asked if I'd be a part of their study group. To be honest though, I think they're just being nice to me to get close to you." Harry shrugged. "Even if they are, it still might have the added bonus of actually becoming friends. At least they're taking the time. If they start asking about me, just change the subject or say that you don't know." "So the first task is just a week and a half away," Ginny said, leaning forward so she could see past Hermione. "How are you feeling?" Harry saw Neville look intently at his soup. He heaved a sigh and looked at Ginny. "I don't know how I should feel. I definitely feel anxious, but I'm not sure if I should be scared or what, you know." "Because you don't know what you're doing yet?" Ginny asked interestedly. "Exactly," Harry said. "It's hard to prepare for something when you have no idea what's coming. Cedric's been helping me and teaching me loads of new spells, which is great, but is it what I'm going to need? What if whatever I end up facing is something that I can't use magic against?" Neville coughed, choking on a mouthful of soup. "I'm sure everything will be fine," Hermione said. "Dumbledore's not about to let anything bad happen to any of the champions." "Yeah, but he can't prevent what he can't foresee." Harry smiled, rising from his seat. "I'll see you guys, I've got to head to runes." "What did that mean?" Ginny asked, watching Harry's retreating form. "Does he know something we don't?" Again Neville choked on his soup. "Maybe you should try not to inhale it, Nevada," Ginny said helpfully as Neville wiped at his face with a napkin, hiding his face to keep from being asked questions. Harry darted out of the Great Hall and was about to sprint up the stairs when he collided hard with something that let out an indignant shriek, followed by a flurry of what Harry recognized to be French. "Petit scélérat stupide. Vous êtes aveugles? Quelle est la question de tha avec vous, vous le petit garçon fou?" Harry got to his feet and saw that he had run straight into the French girl who was one of the contestants in the tournament. She had given him nasty looks during the wand-weighing ceremony, and whenever he had seen her during meals she usually looked quite stuck up. The girl standing next to her was laughing her head off as she helped the older girl to her feet. "I'm sorry," Harry said. "I was in a hurry and I wasn't looking." "Le séjour de ma voix, enfant. Si vous ne pouvez pas me faire l'attention à ou vous entrez dans l'école, comment pouvez-vous vous attendre rivaliser avec moi?" the statuesque gorgeous blonde sneered, moving past Harry, clearly not caring to hear his apologies. Harry watched her go with puzzlement, before turning to head off to his class, before stopping short as the younger blonde girl was standing in front of him with a very pretty smile on her face. "Bonjour," she said, offering her hand. "I am Gabrielle." Hi. Harry Potter." "But of course I already know who you are." Gabrielle smiled. "My sister hasn't been able to stop talking about you. You've really angered her." Harry looked at her oddly and then it clicked. That was your sister. Fleur, oui. Gabrielle nodded. She was sure she could compete against two boys. But you have stolen her moments, as she is so fond of saying. She wasn't even mentioned in the paper, none of the other champions were. What? Really? Harry asked, plainly surprised. He'd not read any of the papers regarding the tournament, so he had no idea what they said. That's terrible reporting. I would think they'd try and get all the facts and report an unbiased and accurate story. Isn't that what they're there for? Gabrielle shrugged. If I were you, I'd try to stay out of her way. She may not look it, but she is quite powerful, and if you really make her mad, she can be vraiment dangerous. Gabrielle! Fleur shouted from the doors of the great hall, looking very angry. Harry swore that her silvery blonde hair was wavy as if there was a light breeze blowing it back. I had better go. It was very nice speaking to you, Harry Potter. I hope that we may do it again. I'd like that. Harry smiled. Goodbye, Gabrielle. Au revoir, Harry Potter. Harry watched the young French girl go until she reached her older sister, who began talking very fast in French. Harry couldn't help but smile as he thought of talking to Gabrielle again. He really liked her heavy French accent, and wondered what it would sound like for her to whisper his name in his ear as he runes, he said, bringing himself back to the real world. As he had promised, Harry met Hannah in the entrance hall right after his runes class. She had already dumped her books in her common room and agreed to go with Harry so he could drop off his things as well. You're the first visitor I've had to my rooms. Harry grinned as he opened the door. Hannah giggled softly at Harry's remark and followed him inside. Harry dumped his books on the small table in front of the sofa and told Hannah to sit while he retrieved a hooded sweatshirt. How do you stand how cold it gets in the castle? Harry asked. Hannah shrugged. The classes are usually pretty warm, and so are our common rooms, she said. So, where are we going on our little adventure? Harry asked, escorting her back into the hall. Wherever our feet carry us. She smiled playfully. They began walking along, the conversation hanging on classes at first, but then leading into questions about how each grew up, which then led into a few more personal questions. So, are you going to ask Tracy Davis out? Hannah asked after Harry finished a story about his first fishing trip with Sirius, which ended with his godfather falling in the lake because he couldn't work the boat's motor. Why are you so interested? Harry asked, looking into Hannah's blue eyes. Every girl is interested. Hannah answered honestly. You remember I told you there are a lot of girls interested in becoming your girlfriend, right? I even overheard a couple of fifth-year girls talk about slipping you a love potion. So, maybe be careful about taking food or drinks from anyone. Why is everyone so interested in who I like? Harry shook his head. It's not like I'm the only boy in this school. I mean, as far as anyone knows, I'm only here until the tournament ends, right? I'd forgotten about that. Hannah admitted. So, does it really make sense for me to get involved with someone long-term and then have to go away? We both get hurt that way, right? I never thought of that. Hannah nodded. So you're going to just date around? I'm going to make a lot of friends and maybe take a few different girls out. I'm not going to rule anything out, because if one of those girls happens to be something really special, it'd be kind of a shame not to pursue her. But who knows? I mean, I've been here only a week. Let me pose a question to you though. Hannah looked up and listened as Harry took a breath. Say there's a guy here in school, someone who's been in front of you all this time, but is too shy to approach you. Someone likes me. Hannah's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. Who? Neville. Harry said with a smile. Hannah's own smile faltered. Longbottom. What's wrong with him? Harry asked, getting a bit defensive. Well, nothing, I guess. I just never thought about him. I mean, I guess he's okay looking, kind of a dumpling though, you know. You mean he's fat? Harry raised an eyebrow. Not fat, just chubby. Plus, he's not very smart, is he? Actually, he's quite smart. He just has a serious lack of confidence. I think Neville's got it in him to surprise a lot of people. He seems to like you. Nearly fainted when I introduced you two this morning. He's so shy. Hannah sighed. Likely due to the fact that he gets picked on so much. Look, I'm not saying that you'll fall madly in love with the guy and spend the rest of your lives together. All I'm saying is, I could be missing a great friend. Hannah smiled. She and her friends had heard Harry say this before. Or, he could end up being your greatest love. The one you end up telling your grandchildren all about. Harry smirked and shrugged. Tell you what. Hannah said, unfolding her arms and hooking one with Harry's and pulling him along the corridor. I will give some serious thought into talking to Neville Longbottom if you win the first task. And what if I get killed? Harry asked with a worried smile. Then he'll be my date to your funeral. Hannah grinned. Do you know what you're going to do? Not yet. Harry sighed. After dinner, I'm going to do a bit of research. I got Cedric working out with me and Neville, and he's been helping me learn some new spells. I think I'll be okay, but it doesn't make the anxiety I'm feeling lessen. I'll be glad when it's over, you know. They continued their walk, Hannah occasionally asking probative questions about Neville, most of which Harry had no answer for, and he encouraged her to ask the boy himself. They walked to dinner together and sat with the other fourth-year Hufflepuffs. Harry thought he saw Susan, who was obviously feeling better now, give a veiled look of jealousy as he and Hannah took their seats. After dinner, in which Ernie, Zach, and Justin told Harry that they had spoken to both Flitwick and McGonagall about the creation of a broom racing course, and both professors intrigued at the idea. Harry headed up to the library to learn all he could about dragons. He was in the midst of pulling a few books when he heard a soft voice behind him. What? Harry said as he turned to face a petite girl with shoulder-length curly brown hair. I said hi. She said. Hi, I swear I know your name. Harry said, giving an apologetic smile. Mandy. She said. I'm a Ravenclaw. We met last week. Right, you're the one who talked to Hermione. Thank you, by the way. I think she enjoyed it. She's very nice. I feel bad I didn't try to get to know her before now. It's kind of funny, we don't live that far apart. I think it'll be nice this summer if we can get together. It'll be really nice because all of my neighbors are muggles, and it'd be cool to be able to talk magic with another witch. Don't you see your other friends during the holidays? Harry asked, turning back to the stacks to find more books on dragons. Not really. I got to go to the Quidditch World Cup with Sue and her family, but that was really the first time I've seen any of my friends outside of school. That's a lot of books, do you need help? Harry smiled and thanked her as she took a few books out of his arms. You're really interested in dragons, she remarked, looking at some of the titles. Her head snapped up and her eyes grew large. Is that what the first task is? Her already soft voice fell to a whisper. Harry's shoulders shot up and he looked to make sure no one had heard, though how they could have with how quiet Mandy's voice was, he couldn't be sure. A rather large bird let it slip to my godfather. Harry whispered to her. Don't tell anyone. Seriously, it could get a lot of people in trouble. Mandy nodded and then helped Harry pull a few more tomes. Do you know what you have to do? No. Harry said honestly. But I'm pretty sure no matter what it is, I'm going to have to subdue it to accomplish whatever I need to do. Well, that'll be tough. Mandy said, walking to a small table hidden in a corner of the library with Harry. Dragons are really tough. Tell me about it. Harry nodded, opening dragons, nature's nobility. I know that their only real weak point is their eyes, but how am I supposed to hit it? That's taking the risk of really angering it, you know. Definitely. Mandy nodded. Harry noticed that Mandy had a small smile at the corner of her mouth that gave her a small dimple in her left cheek. She kept brushing locks of her brown hair behind her ear as she read. Harry smiled to himself. Mandy was really cute. I hear you fly pretty well, you could do that. Mandy suggested. To what end? Harry asked. No, I think my best bet is to figure a way to subdue it. You could try stunning it, but again, you're talking about trying to hit it in the eye, and they're pretty defensive of their eyes. That's why they keep moving their heads. Mandy said with a sad smile. Exactly. Harry nodded. The problem is I can't exactly figure out what I should do until I know what it is I have to accomplish, which I probably won't find out until I'm about to do it. You know what you should focus on? Mandy said, looking up at Harry, her cheeks coloring when he met her gaze. Transfiguration. You can make just about anything with transfiguration. You could even conjure a giant cage to keep the dragon trapped. Harry's eye lit up as he smiled. That's not a bad idea at all. Harry nodded. He sat back, making a mental list of things that might prove useful in fighting a dragon that he could transfigure, assuming there would be something he could alter to suit his needs. Maybe you could ask McGonagall to give you a few good transfiguration tips. Mandy suggested. Thank you. Harry beamed, making Mandy blush furiously. Harry leaned over in his seat and kissed her cheek quickly, making Mandy's blush deepen. Anytime. No, I mean it. That's bloody brilliant. If I can't think of anything else to do, I can always trap it. That will at least limit its movement. Then it's just a matter of doing whatever I have to do, and if it turns out that I'm supposed to subdue it, problem solved. Genius. Thank you. Mandy just continued to smile and blush, but Harry was packing up the books he'd just pulled. Would you have breakfast with me tomorrow? Harry asked as he rose from his seat. Sure. Mandy shrugged. That'd be nice. Great. I see you around 7:30 then. I have to go find Professor McGonagall. Harry said excitedly. Go. Mandy smiled sweetly. I'll put these away. Are you sure? Go. I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you again. Harry grinned, kissing her cheek again and leaving the library. Mandy watched him go, her hand lightly brushing her cheek where he'd kissed her and smiling to herself. Wow. Mandy turned, her cheeks flushing. 2 kisses in less than 5 minutes. Lisa Turpin smiled. How long were you watching? Mandy asked, sounding deflated and truly embarrassed. Long enough. Listen. I swear I won't say anything to the others. Especially given how many girls would kill you if they saw what I had just seen. But you have to promise that I get to be your maid of honor at your wedding. Oh, shut up and help me put these away. Mandy rolled her eyes. Lisa sweet forward and grabbed half the pile, making smart comments as she followed Mandy into the stacks. So she said she'd think about talking to me. Neville asked for clarification as Cedric and Harry ran the pitch the next morning. But if I die, then she said you'll be her date to my funeral. Harry smirked. Hey, sounds like a sure thing to me, Nevada, Cedric quipped, and Harry gave him a shove, making Cedric laugh. Don't put yourself through any trouble, Harry. Neville joked, making Harry laugh now. I'll be lucky the way Cedric's been training me. Harry chuckled. Hey, you asked me to help. Yes. Help, not kill. Harry said, making Cedric roll his eyes. I'm toughening you up. He grinned. You'll thank me one day. Only if it ends up saving me. Harry replied dryly. Seriously, have you two figured out what you're going to do? The first task is like next week. We've decided that we're not going to tell each other what we're doing. Cedric said flatly. We're going to keep working together, but just keep our tactics to ourselves. I'm just trying to survive. Harry said matter-of-factly. Cedric is trying to win, and I don't want to take that away from him. He wanted to be in this thing, not me. Neville nodded in understanding. Well, I'm rooting for both of you. Thanks. The two champions said together. They finished their run and headed back up to the castle, Neville continuing to ask after Hannah with Harry repeating that he just talked to her himself. Neville kept shaking his head, his face burning bright. Cedric encouraged Neville, telling him he would gain nothing by being afraid. Harry showered, changed, and gathered his books for the day, heading to breakfast. He really wanted to thank Mandy for her suggestion. He had rushed to Professor McGonagall's office and had a lengthy conversation about different transfiguration spells. When Harry had left her office an hour later, he had a long list of spells to work on over the next week. He was less anxious now, and feeling like he was actually training for what lay ahead. Hi. Mandy smiled softly as Harry approached her. Good morning. He said, motioning for her to follow. Do you know any of the Hufflepuffs? Mandy shook her head, keeping her eyes low. Well, let me introduce you then. They came to the spot where the fourth years were sitting and Harry made introductions as he and Mandy sat down. Harry noticed right away how uncomfortable Mandy looked. He figured she was shy, but at the moment she made Neville look like, well, him. To make matters worse, none of the Hufflepuffs were really paying her any attention. Harry caught Hannah's eye, and gave her a meaningful look, and gestured ever so slightly to Mandy, who had kept her eyes focused on her plate. Mandy, how did you meet Harry? Hannah asked, and nodded when Harry mouthed a thank you. He's in my runes class, and potions, as well. Mandy's voice was very soft that everyone had to strain to hear her. Well, until that whole thing with Snape last week. Mandy helped me with a very large looming problem last night, and I wanted to thank her. Harry said proudly, nudging Mandy and making her smile that adorable little half smile that gave her dimples. Before conversation could continue, a great big brown owl landed before Harry and presented its leg. Harry's smile grew exponentially as he retrieved the envelope the bird carried, grabbing his goblet to keep it from being knocked over as the bird took flight again. What's that? Justin asked. It's a letter, sweetie. Sally Ann smiled, patting her boyfriend's shoulder, making the others laugh and Justin to roll his eyes. Who's it from? Hannah asked. My best friend. Harry grinned as he opened the letter. Oh, can we hear it? Hannah asked excitedly. Hannah, it's private. Susan scolded. Not really. Listen up. Harry. I'm still trying to understand everything you wrote about. I remember you talking about wanting to go to Hogwarts, so congratulations on accomplishing it, though Salem's not going to be as much fun without you there with me. And I know that Stacy's going to be upset. You should write her. Better she hear it all from you than me, or Headmistress Blaylock. To be honest, I had no idea what this tournament was about, so I asked my granddad. He told me all he knew about it, and I got to tell you, dude, I do not envy you on iota. No way. Though if you win the thing, you have to buy me something totally awesome. How about a racing broom so I can finally kick your butt? Someone needs to before your head gets too big to fit in the dorm. Haha. So on to important things. I want to know about the girls. You mentioned a few in your letter and I gotta ask if you've. We can skip that part. Harry chuckled. Oh come on. Susan said. If you've what? Oh now who's prying? Hannah smirked. Break's been pretty boring. I just went home as usual. Though I was looking forward to hearing about your hang gliding trip. Yeah, imagine my shock when I get an international owl at breakfast one morning. Mom didn't believe it was from you until I showed her the letter. I'm looking forward to getting back to school. By the way, I asked out Kelly Whitney, and now we're a couple. I couldn't believe it when she said yes. Turns out, she's kind of liked me for a while now. I plan on taking your godfather's advice and taking it slow, but treating her the best I can. I gotta tell you though, I don't think I've ever felt as nervous as I do when I know I'm going to see her again. Not even that time we got caught. And you don't want to hear about that either. Harry grinned. Now I really want to know. Zachariah said, throwing his hands in the air. Yeah mate, you can't build us up like that and leave us on the edge of our seats. Justin said, getting an elbow in his ribs and a glare from Sally Ann. You've got to stop elbowing me, love. Justin grinned, earning him a kiss. Sorry, but it's the most easily accessible. Sally Ann smirked. Anyway, I don't have a lot to say in this letter, and I didn't want to leave you high and dry. Write me soon, and tell me all about the girls. Even better, send me some pictures. I'd love to see the kind of witches England has to offer. Maybe I'll transfer. Haha. Seriously, I want to hear all about what's going on over there. I know there's going to be a lot of people who miss you, and I definitely will. Keep your eyes up and your ass down, or was it the other way around? Write soon. Mark. He sounds like he's a lot of fun. Megan smiled from her seat next to Ernie. Oh hell yeah. Harry smirked. I wish there was someone here I could compare him to, but to be honest I don't know everyone here well enough to make a good comparison. Suffice to say he's a real good guy. Maybe you can get him over here to watch the tasks. Susan suggested. I've thought about that. Harry said. I keep forgetting to ask Dumbledore about it. I'll get him to send some pictures of my friends so you can all see them. We'd be happy to take some pictures so your friends can see what we're like. Hannah smiled and the others nodded. We can get that kid, Colin Creevy, to do it. He's always got that camera. That'd be great. Harry smiled in thanks. On one condition. Hannah smiled evilly. Tell us what you and your friend got caught doing. Harry's cheeks went red and he got up from the table. Well, this was great, but I really don't want to be late for class. I'll see you guys later. Harry Potter. Hannah, Susan and Megan called after the quickly retreating boy. Please like and subscribe.